You're about to watch this signal yellow 911 Dakar get one of the world's most expensive and in-depth details. The Dakar was shipped all the way from California to the Chicagoland area for the full bespoke status detail treatment. I filmed the over week-long process and documented every step along the way. If you're a car enthusiast, then sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy this deep dive into the high-end automotive detailing world.
All I need is your love tonight. Say you love me again. All I need is your love tonight. Unbreak my heart. All I need, love me again. All I love me.
The Dakar arrived with all its delivery wrap still on the car, and it was also a little bit dirty, and we specifically asked the dealership to ship the car this way. We wanted to mitigate any accidental things happening at the dealership level because I have done a lot of Porsches and I've seen a lot of things go wrong at the dealership level on accident. So this ensures that I can remove everything and that nothing will go wrong and nothing will get scratched or damaged on accident. It's also fun to show these things coming off in the video, but it also means that it's first official wash and cleaning and prep will be done by me, which means it's going to be done completely perfectly. It's completely shocking how precise they wrap the vinyl on this hood. And then when you come over here and you see how freaking ridiculous that is and how ridiculous that is, it's like, if you can do the vinyl that close, why in the world are you not doing this close? And why are you not wrapping this into the door jamb? But they're wrapping this so far that they're doing it clearly before it was installed because it's wrapped behind where the clips are. That's puzzling. Now you're seeing all the photos I took of just measurements and placements of all these vinyl stickers because I'll talk about this later in the video, but I do need to remove all of these vinyl stickers and put them back on the car. The Dakar comes with a couple different options for vinyl packages, and this was the Africa vinyl package, and it's a pretty cool vinyl decal setup. It's also a very expensive vinyl decal setup. I can't quite remember. It might have been like $2,500 or $1,600 in vinyl. And we have to remove all of it, unfortunately, because when we put the PPF over this, it's going to basically make a giant air gap. But more importantly, all the vinyl is matte. And if I put gloss PPF over this, it will make all the vinyl be gloss, which will be very strange. It's also going to make the vinyl have really weird, odd texture. So you have to remove all of this stuff, and the customer bought a second set of vinyl. So when all of the new PPF is installed, I can then put the new vinyl on top. It'll look completely OEM. Because this vinyl set was so expensive and so rare, and also honestly pretty cool looking, I tried to take a couple pieces off really carefully and put them on wax paper and then send them back home with the car for the owner to have if you wanted to frame them or do something cool with them, because this is a unique thing that not every 911 gets. As you've already seen, the car was pretty dirty when it arrived, but some of these close-ups really show that like there's just this fine grit and dust over the entire car. And this car also sat in the port for a little bit, which makes a lot of dirt end up in a lot of the crevices and things, and that's going to cause some problems when we do PPF later. So we'll talk about that prep wash later on. The first thing I do literally when the car comes in is wash it, and I'm going to do wheels first. What you guys are seeing a lot in YouTube videos of other people washing cars is a product called Iron X, and it's really cool to see on a white wheel like this because it turns bright purple and you can really see it reacting with the brake dust. And it's a very cool, very fun visual thing to see. The problem is for me and my business is almost 95% of the cars I do have carbon ceramic brakes, and that stuff is literally going to eat the carbon ceramic rotor and destroy it and crumble it and fall apart. And you know, CCBs can be like $40,000 to replace. So that's why I use Brake Buster so much, because it's safe on everything and it's unnecessary on a wheel cleaning like this, even on a white wheel, because the wheel is brand new, the car's barely been driven. Yes, it was very dirty, but you'll see Brake Buster gets the job done. And that's why I basically never use products like Iron X, but it is a cool product, but I feel like it's very unnecessary unless a car has a wheel that hasn't been cleaned properly in like 2 or 3 years. Then you will need Iron X, and if you have CCBs, for all the people out there that want to use it, just make sure you remove the wheel from the car, then you can use it, and then when you're done, put it back on. Just don't use Iron X when it's on the car. That's a very dangerous thing. And as you can see, my system of using foam and the Brake Buster worked perfectly. Now this is Geon Tar. Geon Tar is an amazing tar remover, but it's also an adhesive remover. Now dealerships tend to scrub this stuff off during a wash process, or use something that I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they scratch these doors up really, really bad. This is one of the reasons we ask the dealership not to mess with the car, because there are safe touchless methods to remove this stuff. The wash I do on this car is relatively similar to the wash you might do at home on a weekly or bi-weekly basis on the car that you might love. So if you pay attention to this section, you can kind of replicate it on your car too. Now, even though the car is brand new, I'm going to wash it very carefully, and I'm going to wash it with a rinse first. You'll see lots of black dirt coming off the car, and that's all the loose dirt on the car that really is barely holding on. And I want to blow that stuff off just with water, because once that's off, what's left is going to be all the stuff that's really difficult to remove and would require scrubbing with a towel or a wash pad. I want my foam to really dig into that stuff and loosen that, so when I go in for agitation that I'm not scratching the car or swirling it, because the foam really emulsifies that, loosens it, and gives me lots of lubrication when I'm doing my wash. If I just went straight to the foam and didn't do that first rinse, I'm asking my foam to lubricate more dirt than is necessary. So I hope that makes sense. You want to blow off as much dirt as you can, then do your foam, so that foam can really attack the dirt that's really stuck on and is going to actually end up causing the swirl marks and things like that in the process of washing the car. Now you're going to see that I'm using a microfiber towel, and this is a very important change in the system from what we've done in prior videos from about a year or two ago, where I'd use a wash pad. Wash pads are good, but there's only 2 sides to a wash pad. A microfiber towel can be folded into fourths and give you 4 to 8 clean sides, depending on if the towel is double-sided. Now, if it's double-sided, you can take 8 sides. You can use 1 side or even 2 sides per panel, which means I'm never going to reintroduce one of those sides into a new panel, which means every time I touched a door, a quarter panel, a roof, a hood, etc., I'm doing it with basically a brand new towel. Once the entire car has been hand washed, I'll go back through with my pressure washer and I'm going to rinse the entire car. Now, if I was washing the car because it was already protected and ceramic coated and etc., I would use something like G-Technic C2 ceramic sealant, or I would use something like Geon wet coat typically to keep everything really hydrophobic and top it off. I usually dry the car with air, and then I'm going to come back with my C2 ceramic sealant, and I'm going to once over the entire car with that to get the last 5% of water that my air dry did not get. I can't really air dry this particular car because, as you can see, it's not hydrophobic. It was just washed with really strong soap, and there's not a lot that I can do to make it hydrophobic because I'm about to polish it, so there'd be no point in adding anything like that at this stage in my first wash of this particular car. You can see some of these photos. If you want to see more of my photos, you can always follow me on Instagram. I post lots of photos, mainly in my stories. Now, once the car's wash is finished, especially because we have steel brakes, if I just pull the car inside and park it, I will get a large amount of rust buildup on all of the rotors. So I do take the car for a quick up and down my block, basically like maybe 200 feet, and just hit the brakes 2 or 3 times really hard, and that cleans the brakes off so we don't get a rust buildup. The car will be with me about 2 weeks for this detail, and if I literally don't do this, you will get the most ridiculous, crusty, bad caked, rusty brakes you've ever seen on a steel rotor, and it'll be a pretty serious problem, so you do need to do this. It's a very important thing if you're going to let the car sit after your wash. Your new 911 isn't very new until it's had paint correction, and we've talked a lot about this in videos, and we'll keep talking about it because all of them need it. You'll see how the light kind of has all these flares coming off it, and these are basically imperfections in your clear coat. They are kind of like holograms and light swirl marks and some marring, and we'll see some sanding marks in a second too. These are not supposed to be in your paint. Your paint should be just a single dot of light when you shine a flashlight at it, and it should have nothing coming off it. It should look like a perfect clear image, kind of like this door. This door is in halfway decent shape. The other parts of the car, not so much. This is the front bumper, and the front bumper unfortunately doesn't look so good. The hood you saw a second ago, and that, my friends, is a giant sanding mark. That's a pretty big one. It's about 2 inches in diameter, and it's pretty bad. This should not be happening on a car that costs as much money as this particular car. Basically, there was a dust nib, which means there was a speck of dust that got into the clear coat and it dried during the curing process, during the painting process in Germany when the car was produced. And they spotted that during the quality control phase, which is wonderful, and they removed it. And what you're seeing is the aftermath of someone sanding and removing that sanding mark. They just didn't do a very good job of finishing it. They need to polish it again and remove it, which is something that I'm going to do. You'll also see this crazy, weird, big line across the front bumper. This is actually a big piece of adhesive that ends up being put here where there's a big piece of foam, and it's basically like if the car gets bumped or if something bumps into it, it protects the front bumper. Now, unfortunately, it tends to collect a lot of issues and moisture and contamination around that during, I think, the shipping phase and port phases where it builds up this weird line and residue thing. I've seen this on multiple 911s as well too. Now this is the back bumper, and the back bumper has really nasty swirl marks and holograms. Again, this looks kind of like someone attempted to polish this at some point, and I would assume they polished it before they put the 911 Dakar badge on, which again would appear that this was done at the manufacturing plant, and they just didn't refine after they did all that rotary polishing and put all these holograms in. So then once they thought they got it perfect, they put the 911 Dakar badge on top, and that's why it looked the way it looked. There's just lots of problems on both front and back bumpers, unfortunately, on this car. The rest of the car wasn't terrible, but the hood definitely was pretty bad. Again, you can see a pretty terrible hologram on this. This is just basically when you use a rotary polisher the wrong way. It makes that particular defect. And then this is kind of a weird, like, hard water deposit that drips out of the seal on the quarter glass. Very common thing for when a car sits in the port. When the car arrived, it actually didn't have that steering wheel cover on it, but I noticed it in the passenger seat, so I put it on because even I'm not immune to accidentally maybe getting something on that Alcantara. So while it was with me until we got to the cleaning phase, I wanted it on. And it's also interesting that the pedals were really well wrapped in like thick blue duct tape. So there was obviously vinyl up there, but the vinyl up there was different than the vinyl here. The vinyl that was there was like a different material, it was a little thicker, and it's interesting because it left like residue. So if you listen really carefully, I'll flip the mic's facing me. I'm going to flip the mic around so you can hear this. When I run my hands down this, you're going to hear a distinct difference right when I get to the residue here. You hear that? Right there. That is from this sticker. It's the same thing here. This is going to sound different than here. This is where that one big sticker was, so this is going to be kind of the same deal. When you remove vinyl, this is a pretty common thing. I've definitely seen this before. Paint correction and just the act of polishing and compounding will definitely remove that and fix it. I'm going to see if claying will fix it because I have to clay the car anyways. I think a lot of people who detail cars would jump directly into just compounding, which is like the most aggressive thing you could do. They get the most aggressive compound and pad, and they would get through this with that and remove it. And it would definitely work. The problem is all of this residue will end up going into the pad, which will then go back into marring the car in different locations. Now, I can prove that by showing you my gray clay bar. Look, it turned blue, which is crazy. This is like dye and weird adhesive that came off of that vinyl sticker and that was left on the yellow paint, like the clear coat. So you need to obviously clay bar the car to get this stuff off, but the clay gets it off so it doesn't have to go into my pads. I want my pads to always be as clean and you know, clean as possible, because as they load up with dirt, they're going to mar and make it so I can't finish the paint down perfectly, which is important because Porsches do have soft paint, and soft paint can be hard to paint correct. And this might not even show up in my pads, which would mean it would be very difficult for me to understand why the marring was happening. So I'm glad I got it in my clay bar step. So I talk about this on camera sometimes, but I've never really shown you the visual of it. So I paint corrected this and I got the sanding mark out. It wasn't too difficult. And when you're doing paint correction, especially when you're moving really bad stuff like this, you kind of load up the pad with a lot of gunk because you're pulling a lot of clear coat off, and all that clear coat goes into your pad. This is a little bit of an older pad, so it looks not as orange as it used to be. What I want you to more be aware of is just that there's a lot of gunk built up in this pad, and I can blow this out, I can scrub it out, but I'm just not getting it all out now. So I need to bring this to the sink and really wash it out, which is fine. I can save this pad and reuse it. The point is, once you've done that, the pad will be wet, and you're gonna have to let this air dry for at least like 24 hours. The problem I'm experiencing is I've got the sanding mark out, but now that the mark is out, I can't finish this down. I'm getting these like scouring marks or like faint, detailer signature of like light swirl marks that are going back in because I can't finish the panel now. It's because this pad is too dirty. So this pad effectively removed everything and got the bad stuff out, which was the sanding marks, but I can't finish. I can't make it perfect. To do that, I need to switch to a brand new pad. Obviously these are much brighter. This is a brand new pad, this is not. Again, the color is not the big deal here. The deal is that there's no residue, no nastiness in this, and this is loaded up with a bunch of crap. When you have a pad loaded up with a bunch of crap and you're working on soft paint, it's really, really difficult to finish down and get the paint perfect. So you're gonna have to swap pads sometimes where you're doing like a pad for heavy lifting, then you're doing a pad for finishing. You might be using the same process though, the same pad, the same style and hardness and firmness of pad, and the same product, like the same polish. This is why I say like there's multiple steps to polishing, and like a level 2 can be multiple different things. Sometimes I'm just gonna have to do like 2 or 3 different pad changes, but I'm doing the same process the whole time. Lots of people like to think that I'm doing a compound step, then a polishing step, then a finishing step. Sometimes it's all polish, but you're switching pads and you're doing all these things to ultimately get the best result. I hope it makes sense. Paint correction can be really complicated. For all the detailers out there and the DIY enthusiasts, if you're curious what I'm using, it's a Rupes 21 Mark III. There's actually a Mark V out now, but you can buy the Mark III on statusdetailstore.com, and I'll add the Mark V soon. I talk about the Mark V in a video coming up soon. The Mark IV and V are technically the same polisher, but I'll save all that information for a video coming soon. What I do want to talk about real quick during this paint correction segment is that you guys buying these cars, the owners of these cars, have been able to get reimbursed from the dealership in the past. When we find all these crazy problems. It's very rare that I get a 911 delivered to me that's in perfect condition. So when we find all these problems and we document this stuff and I can show a before and after of what it looked like, and we send that stuff to the dealership often will reimburse the customer anywhere from like $500 to $1,000 of my work of paint correction, and that's pretty awesome. The thing is, you guys have to, the owners of these cars, I'm speaking to you, you need to mention this stuff at the time of like signing paperwork, even before the car is delivered, that you have a concern about the paint being bad. You can send them my videos and show this stuff, that this is real. We're not making this up. It's every 911, every GT3, every GT spec car I've done have had problems like these horrible sanding marks and all these defects that need to be paint corrected back out. So you guys need to make it known to the dealerships that you have these concerns so they know. Because trust me, the dealerships are in the back room charging $80,000 over MSRP, like. So 9 times out of 10, they're not going to give you a hard time over $1,000 reimbursement over a car with completely trashed paint that also costs about as much as a house. I would especially consider this if you're shipping a car in, because it might pay almost one way of your shipping, which is kind of nice. And now you'll see I'm measuring and making sure I can put this badge back on perfectly, but I also got something really cool that I'll show later in the video that helped me put that badge back on perfectly. But obviously for the lengths that we're going to already with removing all the vinyl and things, we had to remove this back badge because we just want that PPF to go on perfectly, and on yellow, the high contrast of film and dirt would look horrible. So we really just want everything to be seamless. So obviously you remove the back badge. So now it's time to pull the car outside. Obviously the car was covered in dust. I've shown that a ton in other videos, but I didn't really show it in this video. But trust me, it was covered in dust. And this is something I don't really show very often, but it's something I do basically every single time I do a car. I clean the floor like it's a surgery room, scrub it clean, literally practically on my hands and knees, and then I squeegee all that water back out. The intention of this obviously is to keep my floor clean, but the true purpose of it is all the detailing, compound and dust and stuff from the paint correction and in general dust that's in the room ends up on my floor. When I'm doing my PPF later, I don't want a single speck of that million specks of dust on the floor to waft up into my PPF and make dust. So I really go above and beyond to make sure the floor is clean, and I do that after every paint correction. I clean that floor. Now I'm, again, going above and beyond to make sure there's no dust, so I literally wash the entire car again, but because the car is literally spotless and clean, it just has like dust and compounding residue and dust on the car, I'm just going over the car with water in this case. This paint correction wasn't horrible, so I really didn't make that much dust. When you look at the Sport Classic video, that was really hardcore and there was lots of sanding, so that was a really more intense experience for the car. And in that case, I actually did rewash the car with soap. But in this case, it just needed literally a rinse to get all the stuff rinsed out of the jams and off the car itself. And then I blow dry the car and wipe it down with just Geon Prep, which is basically alcohol. Again, you would never at this stage wipe the car down with anything that had any kind of wax in it, because that will interfere with basically the PPF adhering when I apply the PPF. So now we're ready to pull the car inside and actually start the paint protection film. I really wanted to go above and beyond in this video and give you more behind the scenes of the entire process of what's happening. So this thing is called like a PPF keg. Tint Tanks is just the company that sold it to me. And basically I put all my PPF solution in here, my slip solution, and you'll see I'm measuring my baby soap, which is what we use for the slip solution. I'm measuring it with a syringe, so I can literally make the perfect solution every time, and it's consistent every single day, 365 days a year. Once I have that in there with my DI water, I shake it up and make sure it's all mixed really well, and then basically I'm more or less ready to go. I just need to fill it with air. There's a filter inside this tip here, like there's like a cone filter in there, but then we also run an inline filter here that's got like this screen, and it goes in here. I like this one because I can actually see it, so if for some reason something crazy happened, I would be able to see it in here. And then this just screws on. Inline filter here, but also a filter there, so there's two filters. I've got a rigid pancake compressor in there. It's the best way to fill one of these. You can use a tire compressor, but I have found out that that's a lot of hard work for one of those, and it's going to break it pretty quickly. So when you're using a detail keg like this, you're going to want a rigid or something like this kind of pancake compressor. You're going to obviously need a hose, and then you're going to need one of these. You don't necessarily need one that's fancy like this, but it's nice because it just tells you what the PSI is. Otherwise, you got to stop and check all the time. This thing is rated to 130 PSI. I usually fill it to about 110 to 115. Usually around 110 is where I'm going to stop. And the compressor is going to kick back on in a second and be very, very loud. And that compressor. So the last step is going to be my tack solution. This is what I'm going to use to like make the film stick when I want it to stick, because obviously the slip solution kind of makes it do the opposite of that. So on this one, this is 1,000 milliliters. We were using 2,000 milliliters to fill the big ones. It'd be hard to read that, but that was 1,000. And then we use 7% alcohol in this bottle for 91% ISO. And we're going to do 10% mix, so that's less diluted. This is stronger, this is less strong. It's 70%. You can see I have 91% alcohol, so on 91% alcohol, I'm going to do 7%. This is 1,000 milliliters, which means I'm going to do 70 milliliters. Pour that in there. And that's it. We're ready to go. Always shake it. So now that our PPF keg is ready to go and everything's mixed perfectly, you can see I'm kind of prepping out the front bumper. So even though I've washed the car and done all those things to make sure there was no dust on it, I'm still going to be like hyper aware of dust. So I'm literally spraying out all the edges, all the gaps, I'm spraying down the entire thing, and then I'm coming back in with my blow dryer and I'm blowing all these things out. I want no debris, no dust, no dirt, no nothing that can end up in my film, because I do not want dust or debris in my PPF. Once I spray that all out, I squeegee it all off, and then I'm going to have to spray it again, because obviously when I put the PPF on, I need this to be wet. If I try and put the film on when it's dry, it's going to pre-tack. And pre-tack is when like basically the adhesive grabs a dry spot, and when I pull that back off, it's really, really likely that it's going to cause an imperfection basically in the film. So that's why we respray it and apply all this stuff wet, and then we try and make sure the film is always wet. And then when everything is situated and perfect, we'll squeegee it out, and then it kind of bonds and sticks. And after, you know, about an hour or two, or even sometimes after about 5 or 10 minutes, it starts to adhere really, really well. You'll see I'm taking the cap sheet off, and I've definitely talked about that a couple times, but it's basically a protective film that keeps the top coat of the film in perfect condition. And now you'll see I'm stretching the film, and it's hard to show this on camera, but I'm pulling really hard on that to stretch it and make it contour to the curve of the front bumper. And this is why I love bulk installation over plotting, because this bumper isn't terribly hard to do, but there are lots of bumpers where, you know, if you plot, you're going to have to do seams and relief cuts that are going to naturally just need to be done because of the plotter doesn't give you as much material. Whereas in this case, I have a lot of material and I can just do a fully custom installation. So because I can pull this and stretch it and contour it, I end up getting it on one piece. What people don't talk about a lot, and what I like to try and focus on sometimes, is just because you can do a panel with no seams, but with plotter versus this being bulk, is that when you bulk it and you stretch it and you float the whole piece like I did, what's going to happen is if you install this correctly and you don't have any horrible issues with dust, you're going to put the whole piece down and have no adhesive lines. Adhesive lines look like these big, you know, like ghosting lines when you have to lift the film after it's already been stuck down. And that is because the adhesive is basically being disturbed and it makes a line in the film. This is not the end of the world. You're going to have to expect some adhesive lines in installations, especially on some complicated cars like the 296 Ferrari, which is actually the next video I'll make, and we're going to talk about adhesive lines in that car because that is an extremely complicated and technical car to do, where there will be some adhesive lines in some places. But this front bumper, for example, or basically almost this entire car, there doesn't need to be adhesive lines almost anywhere in the car if you install correctly, besides the vents on the hood, which we'll talk about later. When you're plotting, a lot of the time what you have to do is you have to stick a section of the bumper down, for example, and then to get your pull, you're going to have like the middle stuck down and then pull to the right and left to get those sections. And when you're doing that, you're going to create adhesive lines. So plotting and bulking are different methods, but bulking typically, if you're doing it the right way, will result in less adhesive lines or work marks. They're also called work marks sometimes. You'll see some shots here of me doing my cutting and stuff, and you're also going to see some of the shots I showed a second ago of just how tight all my cuts were. You can't really see where the film started and stopped. I really tucked that stuff in a really, really precise manner. And lots of people freak out like you're cutting the paint here, but you know, we're using very, very little pressure. So once you get that pressure figured out, you're just scoring the film and then you're tearing along that score. You can imagine like if you fold a piece of paper over and creased it and then like tore it on that crease. Very similar concept of what we're doing here. Again, when you bulk and cut to this level, your cuts are going to be like what you're seeing on camera here. They're very, very tight to the car. And in my opinion, you know, you're going to have no adhesive lines. You're going to have really great cuts. And this is just going to be a better installation than when the plotter is being done. Again, you can see the bottom of that there. You can't even see where that was. My cutting has grown a lot, and I'm really, really good at it. You're going to see these cuts are just ultra precise, and you can't even really see where they started and stopped on some of those spots. Cutting is now my favorite thing to do out of basically the entire process. It's the most artistic, the most skillful, and like masterful part of the detail. My cutting has just come a long way, and I'm really excited about it because it's my favorite, literally become my favorite part to do. It's been fun to work with Obed, who you'll meet in a second, because I've been teaching him my cutting techniques and like how I do things, and the person that trained him initially did a great job training him because he's already pretty proficient in it, but I'm kind of teaching him some of the stuff that I do and how I cut things. So you'll see I remove these door trim pieces. They're really easy to pop right out, and it's going to make the top of the door totally seamless when I wrap the film over that edge. It's one of the only things I'm going to end up removing from the car, basically. So you can all officially meet Obed now. Obed has been with Status Detail for a little while now, and I'm really excited. He's basically going to end up being a full-time employee, I think, in 2025. He has amazing work ethic. He's really, really like passionate and excited about cars, which is obviously awesome, and that's kind of the only way I'll hire someone for my company because that's how I am. But the coolest thing about Obed was that he had a lot of experience already. He had already been installing PPF, so he doesn't like have any horrible bad habits, but he also has, you know, knowledge. So the person that trained him is very, very talented, and I'm really, really excited that that particular person trained him because it just helped his jumpstart at Status Detail. But now I'm kind of training him the way I do some things. I'm training him how I like to do bulk installation because the majority of the stuff that he was doing at the other shop was plotter cut most of the time. So I'm kind of teaching him the art of the bulk install, and it's cool to kind of see him like have that information and now have this new information. Like, you know, at the company he worked at, they might have done like this mirror with a plotter, but we're doing it with a hand cut plotter. I'm using my plotter, which is my right hand. So it's kind of cool for him to see these processes, and you can see how I make these custom templates because we're going to berth this mirror, and we're doing that because you can see, there's no seam on the top part of that film, right? It's all one piece because I don't want a seam to be on top of where the mirror is. So you can see I slip this thing over, and it's just a really cool thing to see. You can see I've done this on the Ferraris that I've done recently because the Ferraris have way more paint above the mirrors, but this is just a standard thing that I do on every single car now. We berth mirrors on every car, and you can see all these edges are being extended and cut so we can wrap it and tuck it. I don't want you to be able to tell that this car has film on it. That's always going to be the goal, and so that's why we removed that trim, for example. It's awesome to have Obed around, by the way, because lots of this stuff I can do by myself, but just because I can do it by myself doesn't mean I want to. Like this hood, for example, you need 2 people to roll this thing out and to kind of do the stretch. It just makes it more efficient. It makes it a cleaner install. And when you're doing large pieces like this, for example, it's nice to have 2 people squeegeeing it out because you don't want to get those adhesive lines we were talking about. So if I work one side and he works one side, we're just much more efficient. For anyone that might be concerned about Obed being a little bit new and working on their car, just remember I'm involved in every car and every job, and
it's all supervised.
One of the cool things I can say about Obed, there's many cool things to say, but he's really good at squeegeeing. And it's funny because you might kind of think that squeegeeing is this easy thing, but it's really not. There's a lot of ways that you can squeegee wrong. And, one of the ways is if you squeegee and trap water all over the place, that's an issue. But if you also get the squeegee pressure wrong, that can cause problems too. Now you can see we basically put this down in one piece with the vents. Plotter cut versions of this will have pretty large 4 or 5 inch relief cuts. You can see my hand cuts of that are very, very nice. And you'll also see that, again, there was no seams around that. We also tucked behind that badge on the hood really nicely. And that's just the beauty of doing a bulk installation. Doing that front hood is extremely difficult. That's some advanced crazy stuff. The Dakar is an interesting car. It has a matte wing. The hood and some of that stuff was all done in matte vinyl, but the matte wing is actually full-blown matte paint. So we did have to get a roll of matte paint protection film to wrap that, because if I had put gloss film on that, it would have turned it gloss. So that's one of the unique things on this car where we actually had to do 2 different kinds of paint protection film. We had to use gloss film and matte film. Once those doors were all settled and I made sure that I heated everything, that none of that film was going to pop back up, I put that door trim back in, and now we're kind of done with that section. Now, if you listen to the audio in this quarter panel section, you'll hear something interesting. Squeegee 2 micron. Oh, whoa, there's a big line here too. What is that? You see this line? Oh yeah, it is, yeah. What the hell is that? That's really strange. I've never had something like that. And there's also, I don't know if you see these defects in the film.
I see 2 lines, yeah.
There's I might...
You see that, right?
Yeah.
There's a second one. There's one here, one here.
Take pictures of that. This is a very rare thing, but it does happen sometimes with literally every manufacturer, and this piece of film has a defect in it. It has a huge crease or a huge line through the entire thing. I store my film correctly, and I'm very careful on how I handle it. I always keep my rolls tight, and this was not a thing that we caused. We talked to STEK about it. My rep, who's a super awesome guy, by the way, shout out to Daniel at STEK. You are an amazing human being, and you're just a wonderful rep for our, for Status Detail and for STEK. They ended up warrantying the film, so that means that we get a credit for that film. We all agreed that that film had a defect in it and it wasn't our fault, so they actually credit me the money back for that section of film, and then I tore off a new section of film from my roll, and we installed a clean section with no defect in it. Thankfully, the other piece we put on did not have any issues and had no defects in it, and that's just the quality control we have. Sometimes we have to tear a piece off, and it sucks every time we have to do that because it's lost time and lost money whether or not we get reimbursed for the film. But it's extremely rare, and I love having a company that stands behind the product because stuff happens, guys. At least when things go wrong, at least the company stands behind the product. And for that, I have to say, STEK, you have some of the best customer service that I've ever experienced in the detailing industry. In the couple years that I've been installing film with STEK now, a defect like that has only happened about maybe 2 or 3 times in 2.5 or 3 years. So almost 1 time a year or so. So it's an extremely rare thing, and it's not something you should worry about. You should just worry about your detailer catching it so we can make sure, obviously, that we fix it and put a perfect piece on your beautiful car. Now, these fenders are pretty difficult to install because I do them seamless. Again, this is something that you kind of need to do bulk installation on. You could plot this, but it would be very, very difficult because it requires a very advanced stretch and some advanced cutting and things like that. Long story short, This is a very complicated fender to bulk install. It's a very complicated fender to install even if you're plotting it. What most people do is they pull the headlight out. The problem is when you pull headlights out, you can have some issues with getting water in places you're not supposed to have it. Some people break the headlights. Some people get parking sensor errors when they do that. Another YouTuber who I won't name had their headlights pulled out recently in a video, and it appeared to me like they broke his headlight because later in that video, they showed the car driving down the street and one of his headlights wasn't on. This is why I do not remove headlights. If you do it correctly and you tuck the film behind the rubber gasket, it'll still have the same result as pulling the headlight out and doing it the same way. The only difference is the way I did it is way harder. It's really, really difficult to install that fender that way. And you can see those shots where you cannot see a seam. I fully tucked the edge of the film under the headlight there. I wanted to give another shout out to STEK. When my son was born, they sent me a STEK onesie, which was a pretty cool thing and a pretty generous thing for them to do. So now you're seeing me just walk around the entire car and heat and kind of do quality control. I do this like a couple times. I might do this over the course of like 3 to 4 days. Towards the end of the detail, just to make sure everything is installed perfectly, that there's no issues, no film that's peeling back. A quick note, by the way, you'll see I'm wearing an STEK hoodie here, and I talk a lot about STEK film and how it's the best film and I like it and this and that. I want to be very clear, guys, I am not sponsored by STEK and I never will be. They've never paid me a dime to do anything. I've purchased that hoodie, I purchased all my film, and I say good things about it because I believe it's the best film in the market. Now you'll see I paint corrected the car again, and I'm doing that because STEK Dyno Shield has hydrophobic top coat built into the film. It's going to make it so the vinyl's not going to stick later. I have to remove the hydrophobic layer during this step, so when I get to that step later, I can actually make the vinyl stick to the car. Now you're seeing me just remove all that delivery wrap, and we're basically just kind of going through the interior. After doing PPF and some of that stuff for so many days in a row, I kind of need a break sometimes from doing exterior, so I moved to the interior. That big roll of stuff was the vinyl that's actually going to go back on the car, and then the rest of this stuff is basically just the delivery wrap and all that. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again, the delivery wrap on your steering wheel and your seat, you want to save that stuff. Put it in the front and, put it in your garage, whatever, and keep it. When you go to service, I want you guys to put that stuff back in the car. It'll make the service department treat your car extra special and extra carefully, and it just keeps your seats and your steering wheel cleaner, especially if you're doing oil changes and things like that. It's always fun to jump in the back seat of a 911, by the way. Those are always a little hard to get into, but that's the only way to clean the back window. So that big roll of stuff there is all the vinyl that was in the passenger seat, and that's the vinyl that's going to go back on the car, the new stuff. Now, this is Daniel. I've known Daniel for a very long time, and he's actually the first person who's ever done PPF for me at Status Detail back when I didn't have any idea how to do it. If you go back in my videos, you'll actually see Daniel installing PPF on a G80 M3 that was like a silver, skyscraper silver, I think. So Daniel knows obviously how to do paint protection film, but he's also been doing vinyl for a really, really long time. He's literally the only person I trust to do vinyl, and I've seen his vinyl work before, and he's done vinyl for some of our customers, and he's just amazing. His vinyl work is incredible, and that's why he was the only person I trusted to reapply this vinyl kit on this car that costs as much as a house. This vinyl that Porsche uses, according to Daniel, is basically the best kind of like Avery Denshin vinyl. I think it's called air ingress or air something. It's air release. It's something like that. I probably butchered what that is, and Daniel's probably laughing at me while he's watching this on his sofa right now. But the bottom line is this, to my understanding, is actually really nice vinyl, so it's cool to hear that Porsche uses a proper vinyl for their, for their cars and their liveries. Vinyl is something that I don't think I'm ever really going to put a lot of effort into learning how to do. My, passion is making cars perfect and shiny and all that kind of stuff. So I understand vinyl, and if you're interested in vinyl, you can let me know because I can have Daniel help on the job. But I trust Daniel to the end of the world to do these kinds of vinyl jobs, and I have no interest in learning how to do it in a similar fashion with tint. I don't really want to learn how to do tint. So in these scenarios, I bring in a professional, someone I really trust to be the master at vinyl or tint or whatever, and I let them handle that stuff, and I'll stay the master of paint protection film and paint correction and ceramic coatings. Porsche actually makes these templates for the doors and stuff really cool, where it shows where the gaps and where the bottoms of the vinyl should be. So it actually made it so I didn't need to do any of those measurements on the doors, which was really nice.
Double jeopardy. We are fine.
But that didn't exist for where it says shell, or for the one that's going to go on the quarter panel, or the ones that go on the hood. We did actually have to manually line those up, so my measurements did help on those sections. It was nice to see, though, that the really big one on the doors did have those measurements kind of built in, which really made it easy. So again, thank you, Porsche. You guys did an awesome job manufacturing those vinyl sets. You'll notice that Daniel's wearing like a glove, and these are, I think, traditionally for vinyl, but we actually use them now for paint protection film too. They're really awesome for working in like hard body lines or doing like fenders when you're wrapping things. But I do believe those gloves started out in the vinyl wrap business, and now they're kind of being adopted by PPF people too. Now this is a really cool thing, and it's brand new. This was bought from the parts department at Porsche, and it actually is a built-in template. So again, I didn't really need to do all those crazy measurements for the back, but I don't know if they make these for all cars. I think they only make them for the 992 generation. So if you have like a 991 or something or older, you're still going to need to do all the measurements. But this thing basically lines up with the lettering in the back here, and then it's a sticker, so you stick it down, and it's going to help me be able to basically put the back badge on perfectly centered and level. And it's awesome. I think it's like an extra $40 or something. So if you are at home and you need to DIY something on a 992 and debadge it, I super recommend buying this like $40 template. It's a no-brainer. It's going to make what will take an hour and a half to put on straight take like 10 minutes. Because they don't give me a cap sheet, which I'll talk about in a second on camera, I don't have a way to hold the badge when I'm putting it down. I have to like basically hold it perfectly from the edges, which would obviously never work. So you need something to hold like a piece of tape on the edges while you bring it down and line it up, and you'll see that right now. They should have given me a cap sheet on this piece, which is funny. I'm gonna make one real fast. All right, so I just made my own little cap, which is going to help for this part. So now we're going to peel this off. So now you can see I'm holding the tape and not the badge itself while I'm lining it up. Without having that, it basically would be impossible to put this on. I'm just using some of the tape that actually came with it. I just flipped it upside down, and so I could line it up. But that's really, really important. They should have included that, in my opinion, because it's almost impossible to install a badge like this without it. And just like that, the car was finished. This was a long video. If you're still watching and we're 40 minutes in, then, well, I guess.
Did we just become best friends? Yep!
I genuinely appreciate everyone that watches the videos, but especially the ones that watch from start to finish. You guys are super awesome, and you really help the videos grow. You really help the videos get sent through the algorithm and sent to the For You page. If you've stayed here this long, then please do subscribe, like, comment. If you want to share this video with a friend or share it into a Porsche forum, those things are awesome, and those really help the channel get more views and then get more subs. And I want to get to 100,000 subs in 2025. So for all the new viewers and all the new subscribers who just subscribed, thank you, and I have a lot more content coming. As you might have noticed, I released the Sport Classic video not that long ago, and then this video just came out, and I'm already working on the 296 Ferrari edit, and I hope to have that video out relatively soon too. After about a week and a half of detailing this car, I always do a final set of obviously very cool video shots that you're seeing right now, but I also do some really cool photo sets, and I always post all of those photo sets into my Instagram stories. So if you're not following me on Instagram and maybe you recently just subscribed to the channel, you might want to check out Instagram too, because I'm pretty active on Instagram stories, but I really do post a lot of photos, especially some cooler photos, into my stories once I finish the vehicles. You'll see the next couple shots are the final product with the vinyl back on the car, and just everything was 100% finished here, and the car just looks so awesome. This is such an OEM plus appearance. The car is way more glossy. It has obviously the vinyl installed the way it was supposed to be installed, and inside and out this car was perfection. But I did do some videos and some photos of the car before it had the vinyl back on, because there is something special about perfect dialed in paint with nothing on it, no vinyl, no stickers. On this car, I do believe it looks best with the vinyl, but like I said, there's something special about perfect paint that's just dialed into perfection. I'm really proud of this work that we did on this car, but I'm also just really excited for where Status Detail as a company is right now, because this car and all the cars that were done around this time where I was working on these cars and Obed was helping on these cars, I think this is some of the best work that Status Detail has ever turned out, and I'm only pushing the limits on PPF and all of my detailing skills to a higher, further level than it is right now. So it only gets better from here. As always, if you've just watched this video and you're interested in having me work on your car, just reach out, and it'll be my pleasure to have a conversation about what kind of car you have and what kind of detail you'd like to do.